It's time to consider the relationship between psychology and science. Now, typically in the field of psychology, this question is asked from the perspective, is psychology scientific enough? But I want to turn that question around. Not just asking, is psychology scientific enough? I also want to ask the question, is science psychological enough? Or as Abraham Maslow asked the question in the 60s, is science psychoanalytic enough? The first example will come from Keith Stanovich, who argues that psychology is a science. We'll look at his book, How to Think Straight About Psychology. In the second instance, we'll look at science from the perspective of psychology, asking the question, can science be more psychoanalytic, or can science be more psychological? That will be from the perspective of Abraham Maslow. Thinking straight about psychology? Sigmund Freud might have had something to say about that, Keith. In How to Think Straight About Psychology, Keith Stanovich argues that psychology is a science, or well, it can be a science. There are certain rules you have to follow in order for it to be a science, and the book is filled with such rules. What I want to talk about right now are the three main ones. First, a definition of psychology as a science. It is the scientific study of behavior. It is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. It is the data-based scientific study of behavior. There you have it. There is the definition of psychology as a science. There's three rules that you will follow as a scientific psychologist, or a psychologist who's thinking straight about itself. The first utilizes systematic empiricism. Systematic empiricism is really a big word for it follows certain rules about how data is collected. Let's start with empiricism. Empiricism is the 5 ways that we sense the world. You can see it, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can touch it. See, smell, hear, taste, touch. Yeah, those are all 5. And so the way of accessing the world through those 5 senses, that makes it empirical. Psychology relies on that. Now, not just any observation has to be a systematic observation, which means it follows certain rules about how that data is collected. So if you see that one piece of cake is bigger than another piece of cake, and you're saying that it seems like this piece of cake is bigger, that's not systematic. It's an empirical observation, but it's not systematic. As soon as you bust out your ruler or tape measure and actually get the dimensions, Part 2, publicly verifiable information or knowledge. Just because I've compared 2 slices of cake doesn't mean that one is necessarily objectively bigger than another. Even though I've taken the measurements, and the measurements to me are true, I need to share those measurements with others so that they can take the same pieces of cake, measure them themselves, and say, okay, Dr. Whitehead isn't an imbecile. And so what they do is they sign off, it gets published because it's been peer-reviewed. Rule 3, empirically solvable problems. If we're interested in the size of the cake that hasn't been built yet, not a very good example, huh? If you tell me that you're depressed and I can't actually access you to measure the depression right on you, I won't know if you're actually depressed. That's not an empirically solvable problem until I've created a questionnaire that has been tested, retested, and retested, and this questionnaire reliably measures how depressed you are. I won't have access to your depression. It'll be sort of a theoretically empirical problem, but not an actually observable problem. Testable problem. Alright, so there you have it. That's psychology as a science. Psychology can be practiced as a science. Should it be? Well, that's up for you to decide. Many people think it should, and in fact, the majority of psychologists that practice and apply psychology think that indeed it should be a science, or it is a science. When Abraham Maslow first started studying psychology, he was interested in helping people. A lot of you might have similar aspirations, and that's why you're interested in psychology. He actually studied at one of the more prestigious schools for clinical psychology in the United States, University of Wisconsin at Madison. It's still a fantastic program. But like a lot of programs in the middle of the 20th century, when Abraham Maslow was studying there, it was customary to not even work with people. Most of the patients he was working with were dogs, rats, and animals of some sort. It was believed that if you could understand the way that a dog worked, you could understand the way that humans worked. The model that Abraham Maslow was taught to treat people through was the model of mechanisms. That's 19th century physics. This was the kind of approach that psychology as a science had espoused. So the psychology that Maslow was taught was the psychology of a mechanism. Fix the part, you'll fix the person. And he felt like something was being left out here. Sure, it was scientific, but it was missing something important. And so rather than simply modify psychology, He actually extended this to all of science, asking the question, of course, is science psychoanalytic enough? The first comes from the need to be systematic with the empiricism. So Keith Stanovich defined this as being able to follow certain rules in making observations, and if so, for instance, a depressed person were to come to you, in order to systematically evaluate them, you need to have some sort of measurement, a way of measuring their depression. Well, Abraham Maslow didn't think this was the best way of going about understanding a depressed person. He argues most scientists have limited their investigation to those elements and parts that they can manipulate well, and they're leaving everything else out. What is it about depression that we can't quite quantify, we can't quite grasp? And is it worth throwing that out for the sake of having an easily manipulatable, quantifiable thing to measure? The first question that Maslow poses to science is, why do we limit ourselves to those elements that we can manipulate well? What else is being left out? The problem that Maslow found himself coming up against was whenever he was interested in better understanding somebody and he didn't have the tool that was supposed to be used, he gave up that question. It was as if the question wasn't important if there wasn't a tool ready to evaluate it, or a tool couldn't be engineered to evaluate it. And so you see that there's this big limitation with what tools are available, and that limits what kind of questions can be asked. As a corollary to limiting one's psychological investigation to that which can be measured and manipulated, we also see that when you treat people this way, you're treating them as objects, you're treating them as things. You're no longer interested in a depressed person, you're interested in the depression that they have, as if you can go in and extract it and remove it, and they're just the person that they are. Abraham Maslow found that this dehumanized people. It's as if the way that you can understand the automobile is the same way that you can understand the human person. You started treating people as if they were rocks that a geologist might explore, or plants that a botanist might explore. Now, if you look at either of these two disciplines in more detail, you'll find that a botanist and a geologist don't treat their objects of investigation as mere things either. But certainly psychologists shouldn't. And so when we focus on manipulating a person, have we lost the humanity there? Maslow argues that yes, we have. So from this vantage point, it seems as if Abraham Maslow was seeing two different sciences. One that can measure, manipulate, quantify, and be as objective as possible, that is psychology as a science. And the second one is that kind of important, meaningful, personal relationship between people and getting to know them, like a therapist and a patient. That psychology was distinct from science in that regard, that there was something else there. And so there was the sort of very rigid, rule-bound structure of science, and then there was the personal, meaningful, experiential psychology. So Abraham Maslow sort of decided that there were two different sciences, and so there was one had to sort of pledge allegiance to one or the other. But after time, he realized, once he gave up the perspective of psychology as a science, or being sort of a hard-nosed, lab coat-wearing scientist, and if you practice psychology in a personal way, that there was something important that he was learning as a scientist too. That you take up science from this psychological vantage point, that scientists are actually better, the science improves. So you admit that scientists do have biases. You can't possibly do a study that is unbiased. So for instance, the questions that you ask are always going to be shaped by the scientists themselves and not the phenomena. Finally, Abraham Maslow says we don't need to choose between the sort of measurable, manipulatable, quantifiable science and the personal, meaningful form of psychology. We don't need to choose between them. Our job is to integrate the two. So we don't deny the scientific approach. We also don't deny the personal, subjective approach. Our task as psychologists is to see them sort of being put together in a meaningful way.